Hey, y'all. This is Sam from the Roots of Change podcast, and I am here with Taryn Talley. They are a fractional head of marketing, and they also are an LGBTQS Two Spirit plus advocate, as well as an Indigenous advocate. I'm so excited to have you on the pod. Welcome, Taryn.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. It's a privilege to have a platform to share the experiences in the journey.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm really excited to talk to you specifically today because I think our backgrounds really intersect, and you have such an interesting perspective on like marketing, how we move forward in this moment, and also just like the perspective of this moment, and kind of grounding us in a little bit of a different perspective than what we're seeing in the media right now. Um, being Two Spirit and Indigenous, there is a lot around time and the length of time and kind of our history. So I'd love to kind of first kick it off with, you just kind of explaining a little bit about your background, but more specifically, like, how does your indigeneity come into your marketing and the work that you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I grew up, mixed race, right? And not a lot of acknowledgement on the Indigenous background, or African background that I have. So, we say that my dad was like 3 times darker than I was and looking way more, way more deadly than I do. And, he just never addressed it. Like, I mean, I always said that he would like pretty much just be like, I'm English or something. And clearly people, when they, because, folks will ask you, I'm sure you've got the same thing, right? Where it's like, the things I've heard myself personally, what are you? You don't really fit this box or this box. So he got that all the time and just kind of like just whitewashed it. So I didn't grow up in a tribal community, not on a reserve or reservation. And, was my first engagement in terms of, with the community, tribal communities, was a trip to New Mexico. And to be honest, that was the first time I actually felt like I belonged in this country. Well, so many people that kind of look like me, it actually felt like it was heaven. You know what I mean? So like New Mexico holds that special place in my heart. And I got to just engage with the Tewa people from Taos Pueblo.
Mm.
And, it was an amazing experience. So flash forward years later, right? And I've joined a mixed tribal community. So like multiple tribes, right? Representing this tribal community on the East Coast in Delaware. And for me, it was at a real decision point, right? Personally, I would say. So I met a Cherokee, Little Bear. So I helped him out. He was, I first met him through a fundraiser. I prepared food at a fundraiser, raising money for him because he had a rare genetic kind of within his tribe, liver disease that, he was going to die. So I kind of met him, supported him, contributed money, gave time to try and raise money for him. And he had his surgery and survived and, thrived for several years after. But afterward, he was like, what can I do for you? I said, I would love to connect with the people where I haven't had that legitimate connection. So he said, I have two groups. One is Cherokee run and not tolerant of Two Spirit people. And one is Lakota run by Two Spirits. So I was like, I shall take the latter.
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't want to deal like that because I wasn't out yet. I
Mm.
was still going through therapy and stuff like that. Um, so I joined the community. I started learning the various sacred rites of the Lakota people. Excuse me. And just participating in ceremony, right? Like sweat, doing the monthly sweat lodge with them, preparing the food, and just, I've witnessed Tunkapi at Humblacia, right? I supported people out on their vision quest. I myself went out on that. And that's where I'm going to get to the point is how that changed me. So as I was meeting a Little Bear, I was considering induction into the U.S. Army, right? Because I felt like I was at a kind of a crossroads where I didn't think I could make it Like I wasn't going to be able to transition. It just felt like everything was working against me. So for me, and this one might be traumatic or triggering for folks, but I was like, you know what, F it. I'm just going to go into the Army. I'm doing Cavalry Scout, right, which has been a position that has been staffed by natives for many, many years,
Mm.
because of just the nature of the role. It's a combat role, and I was hoping for death. So I figured like if I died with the insurance I had at the time and with the military, my daughter would at least get well paid, maybe fund her college, right? So I talked to Little Bear about it, and he didn't know I was out, right? Like I was considering, because I would keep when you're not out, you kind of keep things close to your chest, and and when I talked to him about it, he's like, "Let me spirit walk." So he spirit walked on it, and like a month later, I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, I forbid you from doing this. He's like, no more of our people for the white man's soil. Like, it's just not going to happen for you.
Mm.
I don't care if you're from the warrior caste. He's like, this is the way. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
So I didn't like it. I was kind of pissed off. I was like, this really sucks. My backup plan, right? I knew like plan C. That was my plan B. And, so we did that. So I asked him, like, I think it was like maybe 2 months later. I said, can you put me out on Blake? And he's like, yeah, sure. I said, I'd like to do it where you did it. Well, the federal government no longer allows fires on that mountain, so
Mm.
we did it in Delaware in the woods in November. And while I was out there with blankets and a pipe, and connect and water, Little Bear was living in the Inipi for those 3 days. So I had like a 65-year-old Cherokee warrior living in an Inipi as I was sitting out there in the middle of the woods with very little. And so he put me out. And it started with a sweat, ended with a sweat. So when they asked me like what did I learn from that, and it was hard. I mean, Sam, I'm not gonna lie, 3 days in the woods with no food, I mean, I was weak as hell.
Mm.
That last day I was like, I'm sitting here and I'm like praying and I'm like wavering and I'm like all over the place, and I'm just like,
Oof. Yeah.
and I had a couple more hours, right? I knew it because I like I don't have a watch. But I could see the sun setting, and I was just like, "Oh my god, I have to make it." Because in tradition, if you don't make it, the person who put you out has to finish it.
Wow.
Right? It's kind of like a bit of a contract. So that's
Okay.
why we also meditate and pray on
Mm.
it in the NEP to understand how many days will go out. So I'm getting weak. Jimmy, the head of the tribal community, Two Spirit Lakota, he comes out and he is banging that drum, singing some Lakota songs of praise. And I just got that new energy, right? So I go
Mm.
through. I'm in the final sweat when they bring you back with grass ropes because they're not permitted to touch you. So I come back into the Navy, and they were like, "What did you learn?" And what I learned was, if I'm going to learn someone else's, like, if I'm going to, I need to learn my own ways before I learn the ways of others. And then if I'm going to live this life, I need to live it authentically. And it was in the end of 2011 when I realized that that was my path. Like that what some people call radical authenticity. Like my way was to live fully as myself. So I knew that that was going to take time. So my whole life is a long game, the short game at all. Like I play for years. I feel kind of like that scene from Doom where they're like, um, their plans are decided in centuries, millennia.
Yes.
That's kind of how I feel. So, I accepted that. I was like, okay, I can do this. And eventually I got to that point. But one of the things, so like, not only did, just the indigenous culture and tribal community help me find my path, right? Connect me to the people, learn the ways of the people, honor their ceremonies, right? And just learn. Like, I don't speak when I'm with the tribal community because I'm listening and I'm learning. I'm listening to the elders, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, And I just got so much information from that. It helped me become the person I am right here, right? It set me on the right path, you know. And, for me, it also helped me as a leader, right? So, like, in these engagements in the Initi. I think it was the first sweat I did with Jimmy. I'm sitting right next to him, so all the newbies get to sit next to Jimmy, right? I'm sitting right next to him, and he's like, listen, I'm just going to tell you. He goes, the people, like our people, do not put signs out in front of the teepee, right?
Mm.
They don't put a healer or a medicine woman or medicine man or a leader or a chief. Or they don't self-anoint. The people are chosen to lead, to heal, to do whatever, right? So that was like a really eye-opening concept for me, right? Because in this colonized culture, Sam, we see people self-anoint all the time. The bigger, the better the title, right? Like they're just a Jedi, they're this, they're that.
Mhm.
And for me, it changed my entire leadership perspective
Mm.
to understand that it's not me who anoints myself, that I have to be worthy of the people's respect and that they know that I am the person that is there fighting for them. And it completely changed, like, because I feel like with leadership, and I have to speak about this for a little bit, but when we're early on in our careers, where do you get your inspiration from?
Mm.
Your family, maybe some friends, um, you know, maybe a little bit of culture, and definitely those crappy jobs that we all worked when we were 17 and 18, right? You kind of get that, like you understand, because people are yelling at you, barking orders, throwing things at you, doing all kinds of stuff, right? These are not good examples. Like this is like these are the like that's the way to isolate and to be toxic is to look at these examples that you've experienced.
Mhm.
What I did initially in my career was to kind of follow that path a little bit, right? Got some feedback. Feedback was glowingly negative, right?
Mm.
So it was hurtful to me personally, but I understood where it came from. And then so I stepped away from leadership. And then I started really embracing leadership after that ablation sweat, right? It's like
Mm.
I started understanding that my role is not to just stand above others, but to lift others up, right?
Yeah.
And then out of that ablation, my spirit animal is a red-tailed hawk, right?
Mm.
Same as Jenny's. And the tribal community we were a part of is the Bear Hawk clan. So like that really helped pull it together for me, right? Like I will stand and have those people stand on my shoulder. I will take care of them. I will make sure things work out in a way that supports them, right? And I think it's made me a better leader. So I mean that's how I wove in just being indigenous, right? And learning the way of the people and being completely new at it in my 30s, right? And just like you're not having that access, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it was able to influence my life. Some petty, I mean, I consider them large influences, but yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. And I think, what I really love about you is that you do live the embodiment of what leadership can be. And I know like a lot of what you just shared, I really, really relate to. Because I know I'm coming into my indigeneity in my 30s and I'm really discovering my two spirit identity because I discovered the word. And I think, one thing is like language and representation and stories are so important because, to see you and to see you leading in marketing and communications in all of the other realms, like that then gives me the strength to go on and do that. And hopefully I'm doing the same thing for other folks that are coming up as well. And I think so much of like the moment the moment that we're in um is that tension between colonialism and indigeneity. And I a lot of how I rediscovered my how I rediscovered my indigeneity was going back to New Mexico and literally road tripping and traveling, living on the land, being able to like go in and scoop water from the Rio Grande. And like I somehow stumbled on the Indigenous Peoples Day powwow in Santa Fe, and I was not expecting it. And I just started bawling, like feeling the drums and like the connective tissue that is like so deep within Indigenous communities. And I think, you know, so much of communications marketing is really extractive, and like a lot of what I'm trying to do with the Roots of Change agency is to shift how we consider communications to kind of re-indigenize. So I'd love to hear a little bit about like the practical piece of that from like your work perspective. Like, you know, you're very vocal on LinkedIn and other platforms, and I love that. And I'd love just to hear your perspective there.
Yeah, so for me, decolonization, that was really an important step, right, in the process of reconnecting to like that tribal identity. So my tribe is Eastern Band. It's closer to the Shiponi, and my little bear agreed to help me was it was close to where his people were originally from, North
Mm.
Carolina, right, before the forced removal. And so there was common connection. I think he had a cousin that was Shiponi, right? So
Oh wow.
so like it kind of like it related, right? So learning his way was kind of like learning the lost way of mine, because my tribal community is really hyper colonized. Like I went there before I came out, and they integrate Christianity into medicine wheels and stuff like that. Like stuff
Yeah.
that Little Bear would literally get in a pickup truck and drive over and destroy. Because he was really like he helped me be more traditionalist, to be honest. Because I know it sounds almost conservative, but basically what it was more respectful, right? So for me, I don't dig on Christian prayers at the beginning of a powwow. Like you're doing that stuff, you're just like you've lost me, right? Like, and he would say that he would be like, "Listen, I don't hear no Christian prayers there." He's like, "West of Mississippi, this shit don't happen." And that's kind of how he would talk, right? And it's like, but I feel like with decolonization, so you learn that way. But at the same time, it was, I think it was after I really, a couple of years after being in that community, before I really started consciously unpacking the colonization, right? And I think it's got to be very intentional, and you have to understand the impact of colonization is so much deeper than people think it is,
Yeah.
right? People are just like, they get slogans, right? It's like, no pipeline, land back, right? And that's decolonized. Decolonization impacts culture, language, religion, the way the society functions, right? Because like all of those things were broken by the colonizers,
Yeah.
and they broke them to weaken the people, right? And I'm famous for saying this, but I remind people that I'm not up here. I am Oyate, like I am people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I am one of you, and I don't stand above anyone. Um, but it's like unpacking that, the language, how we view media, how we like consume it, right? All of that works into that. So I know you've remembered some of my Indigenous posts, right? I share about the two-spirit identity that there is photographic evidence from the late 1900s. I share about different days, right? Like,
Yeah.
for some people, Abraham Lincoln is a great liberator, right? For other people, he oversaw the largest mass execution in this country of
Mm-hmm.
Dakota warriors, right? And like it's understanding the stories, the narratives, promoting Indigenous creators, right? I'm considering doing a LinkedIn post in a couple of weeks on Zan McLaren,
Mm.
right? Because the work he's doing on Dark Winds right now is epic. Like this guy deserves an Emmy, right? So I'm consuming more
Oh
Indigenous.
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God, if you haven't seen this last season of Dark Winds, like I highly recommend it. The Danae storytelling in that is
Mm.
so powerful. I mean, and I first got introduced to him through Reservation Dogs, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Little Bear actually had I think his vanity tag on his pickup truck was Res Dog.
Oh nice.
It's like so, like watching that show and seeing a show written by tribal members, right, directed by tribal members,
Yeah.
Indigenous people acting in those, like it
Mm.
was so powerful. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was one season, I think it was season 3, and there was a scene where Willie Jack went into the prison to, their friend that killed themselves, right? Struggled on the reservation. Went to see his mom, And she talked about it, about she needed help with something. And she goes, your ancestors are always with you. And then behind her were generations of natives that have come and gone, right?
Yeah.
I think I cried for 15 minutes. Like, I watched the rest of the episode with just water shooting out of my eyes,
Mhm.
right? Because like
Yeah.
that's the power of Indigenous storytelling,
Mhm.
and seeing and promoting that. So like decolonization to me is so much deeper. It's the way we talk, the way we think, the way we interact with others, religion, the choices we make, everything is influenced by that. And you have to consciously unpack that. And even when you do, when you feel like you've made that decolonization effort, there's always something that pops up. Because as like, I consider this as a trans woman, but in a two spirit, socialization is a powerful tool
Yes.
to oppress.
Mhm.
Same thing with gender, the same thing with culture,
Yeah.
right? You were socialized to think in certain ways. Like the way I just described to you with leadership. I mean, how many times do we see leaders tout themselves that have no idea? Like it's the complete opposite of what
Yeah.
we've learned from our own culture, right? And it's like, and that's what's promoted because capitalism and colonization go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I mean, my last name literally is the people my tribe traded with in the
Mm.
1600s. We were first contact tribe, right? Like we were one of those first ones on the East Coast. My name actually has no meaning other than that. So if you think about it, colonization and capitalism hand in hand. My last name is due to who we worked for,
Yeah.
right? Like that's how deep this runs.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I could get into like so much of that right now. I'm doing a lot deeper work of like understanding my New Mexican history because I was born and raised in Texas, and so you don't learn that history. And I like it's just the how white supremacy, colonialism, and patriarchy are tied together, and capitalism as well. But I was reading about the Spanish, coming into what is now the United States. Of course, they, taking over a lot more of like southern parts of like Latin America. But when they started to come into the interior of the US, the first trip that they made included a man that assaulted a Native woman. And we're still experiencing that today. I mean, the story in and of itself, I was like, you changed the name to Bro, and like it is just like what could happen in a city in America today. And it does happen. And we talk about, the missing and murdered Indigenous women. And this symbol here is from a two spirit um, person who made this. But I think like that's where we have to tie those things together, is that history is long and also short. So actually, like I'd love to hear a little bit of your perspective on time and how, Indigenous folks, we have a different perspective on time, which allows us to kind of move, I think, a little bit differently during these movements and continue to fight for justice and liberation.
Well, I mean, the fight's been going on for centuries, right? And if you think back on it, so you said you were in your 30s,
Mhm.
right? So you were born after they allowed natives to openly practice religion. I
Yeah.
was born, I think it was 6 to 8 years before that. So I was born into a country where the practices that Jimmy was sharing and teaching were forbidden to be shown in public, right? Where natives, unless they were elders, could not dance at powwow, right? So, like, when people talk about it and they think about, well, that was like the Old West. My family wasn't here then. Blah, blah, blah. I've heard that more times than I care to hear.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you think about it, it's like the changes that we've seen and the growth of like just indigenous people getting out there on social media and sharing the stories, right? Sharing the validity of like if you're mixed native, right? Because there's also stigma with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like that is so powerful. Like I feel like the same and it intersects with two-spirit and trans. Now there's so much more information out there than there was when I was a teenager,
Mhm.
right? On both trans and LGBTQ2SIA
Yeah.
and with Indigenous culture, and I feel like between those two, like we've seen, so as bad as these platforms are and as limiting as they are and really kind of silencing and weird shadow banning, um, they actually have helped us learn more, share more, right? Like for me, like even with Black culture,
Mhm.
like I didn't learn about the Tulsa massacre until it was like 4 or 5 years ago on social media. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? And I did my own research. I was like, because they don't teach anything in school like that. And for me, one of the galvanizing moments was a documentary on PBS. It's called How the West Was Lost. And I saw it when I was 18. And then I read the story of Tecumseh,
Mhm.
so Shawnee tribal chief. And just his story of resistance. And I just like as that thing was happening, like I started getting more. I guess I was getting a little bit more of indigenous righteous anger,
Yes.
realizing that everything I've been taught until then was complete bullshit.
Yep.
So like, for me, I just think that as much as technology is kind of screwing with us and making our lives painful, that is also helping us tell the stories. Right?
Hmm.
I share a lot of content on LinkedIn that gets somehow less engagement than everything else about the ceremonies and how much like doing a Chinuba ceremony strengthens me, right? Like kind of like Superman going back to the Fortress of Solitude, pulls things together for me, right?
Yeah.
Like sharing those things on there keeps things alive and passes it down to others. So for me, like I think of time as just like I said, it's like it feels like centuries and we're playing the long game.
Hmm.
And it's just like we have to take the wins where we can and continue to teach and educate and support each other and uplift each other, right? Because we're all got there.
Yeah. I love that. Um, I think that that is where we're going to leave it for the public podcast. But I do want to get into a little bit around kind of the suppression online and how we can move through this moment. But I really appreciate just the last piece that you shared around, you know, tech. There are definitely good and bad parts of tech, and I think that's a conversation that we need to have. We need to have a nuanced conversation. Like the owners of a lot of these platforms are very harmful. They do not have designs that are work well for most folks. And so, we need to be vocal about that. We need to push back and we need to find ways to build healthy tech while also recognizing how we can connect and collaborate and tell stories and lift up the things that have gone unsaid. Is there anything you want to say before we close this part of the conversation?
No, I mean I think I shared enough. I think people understand the mindset and the journey, right? And like how my intersections have made me who I am today.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's a really good message for everyone is to kind of rediscover your intersections if you have not already done that work for yourself.
Oh, the one thing I want to add, there's one thing.
Yeah.
So no matter who you are, you're mixed indigenous, you're mixed race, you're European, whatever it is, right? You have to remember that we have thousands of ancestors, each one of us, right? Like I think if the average human has 4,500 ancestors. You have all of that knowledge, all of that teaching. It is in your bones, it is in your cells, right? No matter who you are, if you want to get in touch with the strength of those people, your ancestors, research it, learn, study. Like I think of like the case of like with Ireland, right? Like colonized for centuries, losing language, right? Like seek out that knowledge because you have like my ancestors give me strength. Your ancestors can give you strength too, but you have to learn the way,
Yeah.
and you got to study that. So like I want people to understand from that. It's like it's not just an indigenous thing, it's like a human thing. Right?
Yes.
Like get in touch with that and find your own way, you know.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
And that's it. Now that's it for the brief.
Perfect. Yes, I definitely will echo that. And like, I won't get too deep into my own work, but being half white, I'm definitely doing a lot of my own work around my ancestors on that side and what that means. And, we all have complexity in our history because of colonialism. And that's something that we have to, accept as we move through the discomfort of knowing how colonialism has shaped us in our world.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Well, moving into the private conversation, I really wanted to get into, the silencing, like the digital suppression. And I've been thinking a lot about this, like in a, two spirit capacity because of like the indigeneity and how our history is supposed to be history. Like indigenous people are not supposed to exist. We were supposed to have been eradicated a long time ago. And I feel like, this is a moment where we're seeing a lot of the masks coming off in big tech, and how they have been suppressing a lot of viewpoints. And I really want to like hear your perspective of that as you've kind of experienced that over the years, but also like the tactics of how you've combated that, how you've made sure that your voice continues to be raised up and that you can connect with the people that really need to hear your voice, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, suppression is real, right? So like I saw suppression with my Indigenous posts.